Oh, there'll be reunions afterwards during the Oneg. Yes, that's all true. So I wanted to share a little bit about something in the text that I couldn't avoid. I was trying to figure out something to share with you, and then there was this message that kept coming out, and it reminded me of not the very first piece of Torah I learned, but one of the first pieces of Torah I learned was from November of 1970. It was Mike Brady. Do you know who I'm talking about? Some of you have no idea who I'm talking about. That's fine. But do you remember in the Brady Bunch where the boys, I'm really talking about the Brady Bunch, yes, where the boys find a wallet. Do you remember them finding a wallet? And in the wallet, they found $1,100 cash in the wallet. By the way, if you account for inflation, that's going to be about $7,000 today. I'd be happy with $1,100. That's fine. The boys, you remember them, the boys wanted to keep all of the money for themselves. And who's the oldest? Greg? Greg was already having calls out for a new car. And the daughters, the girls, wanted to split the money and divide it up, and Jan was doing the math. And they couldn't keep the money, no matter how much they argued or tried. The dad made them put an ad in the paper, bring it to the police, and they had to find the owner of that $1,100 cash in the wallet with no ID. And somebody was found, and it turns out to be, I can't believe I'm saying this, Mr. Stoner. Do you remember? It was 1970. I think they had a different appreciation of things. So strange. So he comes, and he gets the wallet. I can't believe I said that out loud. And he gets the wallet, and there is this really powerful moment of return. Now, I don't think it was the greatest of episodes of the Brady Bunch. Frankly, I didn't like the show at all. But there's something significant there. And it was good Torah, because when you were a kid, it was unfair. Your parent is being harsh. And you become a parent, you recognize that the dad totally had it right. And there was something important about a society when you do something that's right when it's simple. For kids, that was a really hard thing to give up. But for the dad, it was pretty simple. It was true. It was right. It was good. And they were watching. So when you look at the Torah and you see these scenarios of the things that we need to do, when you find a lost item, you have to return it. It seems kind of obvious, but it's in the Torah. Why would they put this there? In fact, they kind of go on for a while about this idea of returning this lost item. If the person's far away from you, you have to hang on to it. There's not like, a 20-day grace period and then it's mine. That's what my parents said. Instead, you had to really hang on to it. You had to protect it, hold it in trust in order to give it to the rightful owner. I think that's pretty powerful. And it was about a number of things. It was garments, it was animals. Then it says this interesting thing, lo tuchal lehitalem. And the translations we read, and I share this with you often, is you must not remain indifferent. You must not remain indifferent. Now, I don't think it's the best translation personally. We'll go a little further. I think the root of this lehitalem is about you can't neglect, and you can't ignore, you can't overlook, and you cannot disregard. Some will say that they'll translate it as you can't turn away. I kind of appreciate that because when you turn away, you're turning away from seeing God. Or God perhaps won't see me do something naughty. So the turning away is a way to avoid a sense of righteousness. You can't turn away. You can't hide. And I think that's where the word is really all about. You cannot conceal something. And when it comes to appropriate things, appropriate actions, decent acts toward another person, we cannot hide. And I know that we are taught that as kids, and I've said this so often recently, it's kind of been driving me. We know this, and yet we're taught this, but we're not trained to really do that. We're trained to exactly hide and conceal and ignore and turn away. That's how we're trained. But we know if we think about it, if we let ourselves be open to it, that's not who we're supposed to be. When an animal falls, you don't ignore it. The same word, hitalem, is going to be in the root. When you see birds nest along the way and the mother bird is there with the eggs or with baby birds, you have to, if you want to use those eggs or birds, you can, it's permitted, but not in front of the mother. Even the mother bird is going to have feelings according to our sages, and you have to be mindful of those feelings of a bird. You have to shoo the bird away. You cannot take what is most precious in front. You can't ignore that they are part of creation. You have to build a parapet. I didn't know what a parapet was until I went to rabbinical school. Nobody ever talked about a parapet to me. This little fence that's on your roof. Why? In case somebody's on your roof, you don't want them to fall. It's very Jewish, actually. When you say it out loud, you have to have that protection. If somebody is going to encounter your space, you have to do everything you can to make sure that they stay safe. That's not extraordinary, that's ordinary. That's appropriate, it's decent. It's just the right thing to do. Now, there is a more challenging verse in the midst of all of this. I know some of you are familiar with it. The verse goes that if a woman must not put on a man's apparel, nor shall a man wear women's clothing. It isn't as clear why this would be here. Why it says in the Torah, in the midst of all of these decent acts, that you can't wear clothing associated with another person's gender or the opposite gender from you. Why would that be? Some are going to think that this is a clear challenge to a transgender community, but I don't think so. I think you can read it that way, but if you look at the context, look at what it's in the midst of all of this, these decent acts of goodness, of doing right, then it's not so much about what we wear. It's how we are going to conceal a truth and be somebody else in order to take advantage. You cannot disguise yourself in order to get access to another human being to take advantage. And some of our commentators are leading us into that space. Well, in the context, that makes perfect sense. Because this is about the ethical, it's the decent, it's the appropriate. It is what God expects of us, an appropriate behaving society. Nothing so extraordinary, but you can't hide, lehitalem. You cannot conceal. You cannot make something disappear for who you think you might be and how you take advantage of somebody else. But again, I said, I feel like we're trained to do exactly that so often. Lo tuchal lehitalem. It's not about not being indifferent. It's not to conceal something important. I think there's something powerful about these ideas all coming together. Ethical acts, protecting people and animals. And we are in the midst of Elul when this rises up. The month before Rosh Hashanah, preparing our souls, figuring out who we are. Where are we hiding? What are we concealing? How are we going to step forward and do something appropriate instead of just turning the other way and pretending we don't really see because I don't want to get involved? How do we go the extra mile instead of standing idly by? These are the questions. So I want to share one little piece of you. I don't often quote the Hasidim of old, but there's something that's really powerful for me. The early Hasidim talk about avodah shebagashmiut. And they talk about worship or service through the everyday. The Hasidim believe that God is everywhere and is in everything, and everything is imbued with godliness from this table to the microphone to us. Well, that makes sense. We can understand that. It might not be your particular approach to God, but you understand that there are some who can say that there is no place without God. There's a potential to encounter the divine in every single moment, in every single being. So this Avodah shebagashmiut is about serving God through the material world, through our work, through our conversations, our travels, our relationships, our eating, everything that we do. Now, it's kind of a hard idea to really bring it in because we live in a society where we're kind of making choices. We're Jewish here, but over there I'm just going to work. I might be Jewish in the sanctuary, but when I leave the synagogue, I'm just kind of going back and being normal again. We, in the American Jewish community, have a hard time bringing them all together. But I think that is what is being asked of us. Not to proselytize, not to get new members, but the idea of living Jewishly, through a Jewish lens, bringing things together, embracing ritual not because we're told to, and this is how to, but because they help us achieve certain goals. And the goal always is going to be about balance and awareness and transformation. So there's a rabbi that I read sometimes, Michael Strassfeld, and he wrote, to be righteous is not to do all the particular Jewish traditions perfectly. And I think he's right about this. It's to live a life of goodness and holiness by the teachings structured by our traditions of Judaism. So friends, it's Elul. This is our time to prepare. Let us not disappear. Not just to disappear from when we need to act, but to disappear from our own personal journeys and growth. Let's not disappear. Let's not conceal ourselves so that we are not authentic in sharing our truths and sharing our Torah. Let's not be negligent and turn a blind eye or ignore those who are calling out to us. And let us be aware and be in awe and be present and respond to these days and to one another to bring the shalom that we talk about. So, let's turn